Good morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by FinancialJuice.com with George Avedon and Milton Romanides. Thank you for joining us this December 12th, 2014. Certainly Friday, lots of information coming through. Uh, of course, the headlines all across the globe is really this crude oil, West Texas Intermediate crude at 58.48 this morning, lower by $1.44 USD. We have the futures lower, so risk off trade this morning. A bit of a continuation from yesterday's day. We'll get into that in just a moment. At lower by 10.75 at 2013.50. Amazing how sentiment changes rather quickly in our industry, and this is why it's important to understand sentiment, to have an opinion, to put enough color in your trading day to have an opinion, to incorporate and understand sentiment. Again, S&P futures lower by 10.5 points at 2013.50. We have crude lower by $1.45 at $58.50. We'll get into the technicals in a few minutes. Let's get involved in what we're seeing, what we saw yesterday. Certainly yesterday's activity in the oil markets, and what happened in the afternoon was very interesting. So certainly we had a risk on trade in the pre-market and opening rotation. What we saw in the afternoon, if you take a look at the intraday chart, for example, in the ES, you really had this very unique pattern forming in yesterday's trading. So you had this risk on trade, and then you really had this just precipitous profit taking throughout the day. We mentioned there are some important levels, the 2035 levels intraday. We kept on mentioning it throughout the day in the room. It hit that at about just a little before 2 o'clock, bounced from that level, and then at some point at the 2045 level, 2046 level, began to turn again south, and it really continued south for the rest of the trading day. It finished low higher by 0.45% at 2035.33, quite a bit lower than. So if you take a look at the intraday high in the ES yesterday, we were looking at about 2056, and we finished at 2030 in the ES. So a rather significant correction during the day. Dow Jones Industrial Average finished higher by 0.36% at 17,596.34. The Nasdaq finished higher about 0.5% at 4708.15. So again, this morning, S&P futures continuing what we saw in the afternoon yesterday, and again, oil continues to be at the forefront of activity. One of the so again, from a geopolitical perspective, we've been a little bit not as much news, or again, the eye has been not as focused on what's happening in terms of ISIS, ISIL, and Syria. Certainly, we're keeping an eye on that to see if anything bubbles up out of that. But also, really, this oil is taking attention front and center. And we'll get into the specifics of what we're anticipating perhaps to happen within the coming days in oil, and what the conversation is around trading desks, specifically in oil, and as we take a look at this market. in certainly oil is affecting oil price responses by Russia, OPEC, non-OPEC nations. You'll see the deterioration, or you saw the deterioration in the smaller names in oil in the U.S., a lot of these shale names. We did some research yesterday, actually, and the average Middle East cost to production for oil is at $16. So that's average. So you have some countries that are a little bit higher. You have some countries that are a little bit lower, clearly. So again, being the average, but that's something that's really important to note. So even at $58 oil, uh, the markup is significant there, specifically from the Middle East. Certainly, other countries need that to be a bit higher. We know Russia's a bit higher. Iran is a bit higher. Venezuela needs it at a particular price as well, quite a bit higher than that. So again, and it's if we see the persistent decline of oil or at deflated prices, what effect will that have in the specific countries politically? So that's something that we're concentrating on that as well. Continuing on, we had the International Agency cut forecast for global demand of oil. This is rather significant. Again, we do see oil lower this morning. Also, Chinese factory production slowed by anticipated was 7.5%. The actual number was 7.2%. So a bit of a slowing. We know that China has been reporting, indicating some implicitly, some explicit information with respect to GDP slowdown. So interesting to see how factory production factors into that particular information. Moving on, we also had ECB says supervisory board endorsed capital plans today. There's various information coming out of Draghi, the ECB, in with respect to timing. So I think that's again very poignant to point out, very poignant to note that. What will be the decision, what will be the action on the part of the ECB, and the reaction in the currency specifically. Always we have been watching the dollar, the DXY this morning at 88.303, lower by 0.367. And we have the euro at 1.2463, higher by 0.0071. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. But again, all of this information, this macro news, does tend to have an effect on perception of currency, if there's any currency wars, and should the dollar continue its positive momentum, that does have an effect on oil and gold and so forth. So this morning we had the PPI final demand number for November, month over month, was negative 0.2% versus the expected negative 0.1%. Previous was 0.2%. So final demand goods, ex food and energy, down 0.1%. Now remember, this is for November. We really saw a bigger decline in oil in the beginning of December. So we saw a little bit of oil come into a little bit of a sell-off towards the end of November, if you remember, after Thanksgiving. But interesting to note that I think we'll see a little bit of an impact on a little bit more of an impact on that PPI once you consider the significant drop in oil on prices on the PPI. And again, remember, oil does have an effect on consumers, and this is something that we've been mentioning, and it's beginning to get into the lexicon of other analysts as well. But we've been mentioning this for quite some time, and it is a massive boon, massive positive for the consumer. It's just they're just spending less at the pump, and I think that's a huge piece. So what we'd like to do is, before we get into the overnights and before we get into Europe and various other information, what we'd like to do is get into some of the technicals that we're seeing. Milt, you've been right on the technicals for days now. We saw that 2035 intraday support break yesterday. What's on the radar this morning? If we can spend a little bit of time on the ES, and then we'll jump into crude oil in a bit. What's your take on the ES coming into this morning?
Well, this morning we have a it's negative feel again on the markets. The ES is down about 10.5. With fair value, I believe it's down 13 something. It's going to be an interesting day today. It's a Friday going into the weekend. It's going to be a lot of people trying to position for any feel on a weekend move here or there. I think in the afternoon you're gonna have a light volume, but you have to understand next week we have the Fed, so a lot of people are gonna start, pointing fingers on what's gonna happen, what are they gonna say, are they gonna take out that quote unquote considerable time comment, are they gonna be a little more hawkish this time around because of the recent jobs numbers? What exactly is gonna happen? Is Yellen gonna turn a little hawkish, or is she gonna stay the same and stay dovish? You flip a coin, and then those are the odds. So right now, that's going to be the feel. Technically, on the ES, we have we mentioned yesterday that the activity to the upside and downside. We mentioned a few numbers, and we mentioned that the support number that 2035. What did the ES close yesterday? Right around 2035. So that was the support number. That's where it had to hold. This morning we're trading down. We're trading at 2013.50 right now. The futures are, showing a negative bias this morning. Technically, you have that support break. So right now we're looking at 2010, 2015, where we're trading right now as the next level support, and the ideal number at 2000. And we've mentioned it. We would like to see that 2000 number being hit. But right now, support level to 10 to 15. It's currently where we're trading pre-market. The resistance is at 2035. You have a 20-point range right now, so you may have a lot of fluctuations. So keeping those two numbers intact, 2035 to the upside resistance, 10 to 15 to the downside support. Any break below that, I think we can easily see 2000. And at that point, the bulls really need to take charge and have it settle around that number. If we break that 2000 mark, I think we can easily see 1950s. So right now, the numbers to the upside, 2035, followed by 2050. Downside looking at 2010, 2015 to 2000 on the ES. Let me just jump on to the VIX real quick. We've been mentioning VIX for days on days. We've been mentioning that 14 number to 16. Last week we've mentioned that. Once it broke that number, once 16 was broken, we would have a move to the upside and a downside move in the markets. What happened? 16 was broken. We hit a high yesterday of 2008, 2020. We closed at 2008. So clearly that 16 number is in play. Yesterday, during the day of the trading day, the VIX opened at around 18 plus, dipped right to that 16 number that we talked about, right to that 16 support, bounced right off that 16 support, and closed at the highs. It's all technical, folks. A lot of people do not understand it. a lot of mechanism these days is based on technical analysis. Understand it. Try to get a feel, because a lot of big traders still use that to this day, even though many of the newbies throw it away like it's absolute garbage. But technically, we mentioned it, that 16 number was support. It hit it yesterday to a T, bounced off of it, and closed at the highs. Right now, the next level of support on the VIX is still that, we have maybe the upper 16s, as a support possible, but nothing really until we hit that 16 number again as support. The resistance levels are around 2150 to 22. If that is broken, you can see At that point, we'll have to figure it out because right now I can't even tell where it can go next. But those are the numbers: 21 to 2150 to the upside resistance, mid to upper 16s right now on support. Keeping an eye on those levels on the VIX. Oil. What can I say about oil? Oil is just a money pit of disaster for a lot of people these days. Goes down every day. You have those heroes out there that try to guess and do this and do that. It's not going to work, guys. You have to let it do what it needs to do. Don't be a hero. We mention it every day. We've mentioned it since the 70s. Stay away from this trade for now. It's not healthy. It needs to have a quote-unquote capitulation bottom. Many thought it happened. I haven't seen it yet. We need to see a vicious move from the lows to a very strong volume move to the upside and close positive. Right now, oil's down over $1.30, over 2% at 58.60s. Ideally, for a capitulation move, I'll give you an example. You need to see this oil close up $1 today on heavy volume. That's a capitulation bottom. We'll see if that happens. We'll see what happens today. We'll see if the moves continue. Stay away from oil until you see that bottom. Don't be a hero. You know, it's going to happen eventually, and then, yes, it could be one of the biggest trades of the year. But the question is, will you be around for that to happen? Let it do what it needs to do. Let it settle. Let it do what it has to do. Let it relax, and then you can jump into this stuff, into oil plays. George?
Milt, what if we don't get the volume? What if we don't get the high? We always talk offline, in terms of oil. We were speaking last night. There's a lot of concern out there that this slow move down is really testament to the fact that a lot of folks are still holding on to the commodity. Still holding on to various securities out there. What if we don't get this?
Yeah, you haven't had a puke yet. I haven't seen a puke. You need to see a puke. Clearly this morning, we're down 2%. It's a significant drop, but you still have to see. Excuse me. You still have to see that puke. You haven't seen it. Individual oil names are trying to bottom. You can see that happening. Oil, though, is still dropping. What happens? We were discussing this after yesterday, George, offline. What happens if oil does not reverse? What happens to these companies? What happens if 6 months from now oil is still in the low 60s, in the 50s? Yeah. Are those companies going to be around? I doubt it. But that is what everyone thinks. You're hearing the talking heads on TV coming on every day, saying that oil is going to go back to 80s. Where were you when oil was trading at $100 a barrel? Saying that, what was it, Goldman Sachs was out saying 3-4 months ago that when oil was trading at 100, they could see it trade at 100 for the next 5 years. Right. But where are they now? People don't understand. We have Scott just walked in. And he's got some interesting comments. I'm gonna let Scott take over on the oil, and if I have any questions, I'm gonna throw a couple at him. But it's always good to have a different perspective. So Scott, chime in. What's your feel?
We have a very special impromptu guest, Scott Nairns. As you know, he's a hedge fund manager, risk analyst, trader. I mean, he's been around for absolutely ages. What's your thought on this oil, man? I mean, this is.
Well, I'm not that old.
Not that well,
Oil,
he's just wise. He's wise.
Oil is listen. It's a matter of supply and demand, and the dollar is denominated. The purchase of oil is in dollar denominated. So when you have a high dollar, it's going to affect. So okay, this we understand. Oil is a matter of supply and demand. There's so much surplus, so much, and it's not being used up. Brings the price down. Every fund who has tried to bottom fish this has gotten caught. They've gotten stopped out. They've gotten annihilated. There will be redemptions. It's gonna be bloody and ugly. There's no reason for the price of oil to go up. My partner keeps saying, well, Harold Hamm took off his hedges. He is the majority owner of Consolidated Resources. But there's no reason for the price of oil to go higher for the foreseeable future. You have a tremendous glut. It is priced elastically, meaning that you use what you use. Because the price of oil comes down doesn't mean that you're going to drive further to work or you're going to use it much more. You might drive rather than fly somewhere because it's cheap, but also the price of flying will come down as input costs come down. What I would do because of it is I would play the companies that are affected by the lowering price of oil. The ones that are petrochemicals, the Dow Chemicals, the DuPonts. So long as you might check to make sure it's not correlated to natural gas as opposed to oil. They're using oil, Dow Chemical, Alcoa, Boeing. Boeing is less sensitive to macro and more sensitive to microeconomics when it comes to oil. It's directly correlated. I would be buying Boeing pretty much, nibbling for sure. See if it comes down anymore, but I would absolutely love it. They have a 20-year backlog on airlines. What else would I be buying?
Scott, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Would you be buying any individual stock-focused oil names,
Yes.
or would you be more of a looking at the bigger picture in what is affecting oil? I've been hearing people saying, oh, when oil reverses, you got to short the airlines and the transports. Is that something that that crosses your mind, or are you more focused on, what, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to focus more on the oil names that have been decimated because of oil, and focus on that trade?
Yeah. That's a great question. First of all, let's take this out of the equation. For everyone out there who's a trader who thinks that I'm going to catch the bottom, there is no bounce. This is not going back to 70, 75 anytime soon. Anytime. Months and months and months. What you might have is a one-day ephemeral bounce. What does that mean? Yeah, it can go up to $3, $4, and then everyone in the world will take it home long overnight, and it may work, it may not work, but that's a flip of a coin. It's a binary bet. It's not something that you do. You want to get paid for taking risks in the stocks or commodities, if that's what you play, that gives you the highest percentage chance of working. So so take that off the table. Now, in answering Milton's question, do you want to maybe play individual stocks or play an index? I mean, I still love Exxon. Yes, it's cheap. I'm a buyer of Exxon because it's not as affected to the price of oil as all the other ones, the Whiting Petroleum, the CLRs, the EOGs, I could go on and on and on. The Halcons, whatever. I've heard that. I think a lot of these will be consolidated and/or go out of business. They have so much debt and doesn't come back. They're not drilling. So, so I would be buying some of those. I mean, if you wanted to buy just an index, say I don't want to buy just an Exxon. I want to buy XLE. I guess you can, but why do that? I like the balance sheet of Exxon, and I'm in there with Buffett. So that's my thought. Good.
No, perfect, Scott. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, a very impromptu, and thank you for coming in. And always great to hear an insider, if you will, of people who are in the know, people who are executing on their own ideas, and so thank you to Scott. So let's. Milt, should we spend just a few minutes on gold? Anything that you're
Yeah,
seeing?
I'll just finish up real quick, George.
Sure.
So then we get the market open in a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So basically, let me just finish up on oil. Let me just give you a couple numbers on oil we're watching. We have the resistance levels in that oil number around intraday resistance, that 59.50 level.
Mm-hmm.
Could be an intraday resistance, but ideally you want to see it break that 60 number again. 61, 61.50, short-term resistance above 60. Intraday support, 50, at this point it's so difficult sometimes to even figure it out, but around 58.50,
Right.
58.50 level is
Right.
some sort of support.
Right.
Outside of that, we'll tackle that one if and when it's broken. But right now, intraday during the trading hours, 58.50 to the downside, 59.50 upside with a 61.50 top level resistance on that. Gold.
And remember, Milt, we're at a 5-year low at oil.
Yeah.
That's really important to know from a time perspective. This is a rather significant move. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let me just finish on gold. Gold's
Sure.
the same story every day. We talked about gold. That 1,200 number needed to be broken to the upside. It was broken with volume. It's been trading above that number for a few days at least right now. So it's trying to build a level above that 1,200 number. If it continues, I can easily see a 1250 print on gold to the upside. Once that 1230 previous high 1240 level is broken, To the downside, we're looking at that 1200 support number, which is somewhat strong right here, and a break below below that to about 1150 to the downside. But right now, the numbers to watch: 1200 support, 1250 resistance. It looks like it's building some sort of a base level here above that 1200 number, and anything above it, I think we see some volume break to the upside around 1250. George?
Perfect. Thank you, Milt. So, folks, there you have a good technical outlook on the major, the ES, the VIX, crude oil and gold. So a good trader, not just it isn't just on pure fundamentals, isn't just on pure technicals. It's a combination of both. Have to understand the implication of a move and the reaction, the possible reaction in the market. The comparison that we always use is, when a general goes into battle, is scenario planning. What if something happens? What if something goes through a particular technical support level? What if there's particular news coming out of the ECB that may impact the euro, that may impact the dollar increasing or decreasing, that effect on oil, and oil volatility, and that with respect to technical analysis. So putting all of that together from a macro perspective, I think it's absolutely crucial. And so thank you for that, Milton and Scott. So let's get back into what else is making news this morning on the desks. So let's have a quick. We have about 5 minutes before the U.S. Open here. Let's take a look where we are. 4 minutes before the Open. So in Asia, and overnight, remember we had a deterioration in the U.S. markets. Nikkei towards the close yesterday. Nikkei higher by 0.66%. Hang Seng lower by 0.27%, and the Shanghai higher by 0.42%. Remember, Shanghai had some very impressive volatility as of late, so it's very interesting to see it, at least the volatility, stay within that 1%. Stay within that 1% volatility range. But again, keeping an eye on those indices and see how it translates into the U.S. trading this morning. The FTSE, FTSE lower by 1.47%. CAC in Paris lower by 1.64%. DAX in Germany lower by 1.55%. IBEX in Spain is lower by 1.51%. So a bit of an extension on some of the indices in Europe. We're seeing ES futures still lower by 10 even. Let's call it 10 even, at 2014 even. The oil this morning's lower by $1.21 at $58.74. These are the names in terms of ETNs and ETFs that we'd recommend monitoring as you watch oil. If at some point you decide to trade oil, certainly be prepared for volatility. As Milton said, there's still a lot of opinions out there. To piggyback on what Scott is saying very explicitly, it's a binary bet, and a binary bet basically is indicating that you could be wrong 50% and you could be right 50%. And the reality is, when we went into the OPEC meeting, we're going to keep on harping on this because this is really crucial, because a lot of people made a mistake. And this is critical here, because it was a binary bet going into the OPEC meeting, and a lot of people were wrong. Larger analysts were wrong, and so we saw this massive sell-off in the oil. Where it goes, we'll continue to watch it. As a recap, Saudi minister basically stating, hey, listen, we're going to stay the course. EI, the International Agency Association, indicating that Demand is falling. So again, folks, you got to put the pieces together. You got to do your own scenario planning as well. A bit of due diligence. We'll provide you as much as we can. But again, keep in mind, we've seen consistent decrease in macroeconomic activity, China hinting, Euro hinting, Draghi and ECB mentioning that, possible quantitative easing and stimulus and so forth. And that's really crucial as we're taking a look at the demand for oil, and that's, as Scott said, the elasticity of the demand for oil, so keeping all of that in mind, let's have before the market opens, let's have a quick check on where we are in the commodities, energy, and raw materials markets. We have crude oil again lower by $1.23 at $58.71. We have gasoline lower this morning by 0.0113 at 1.6132. And we have the markets are open in the U.S. 9:30 Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. Remember, folks, we've been mentioning gasoline. The lower gasoline goes, there's more money in consumers' pockets, and it's less of an inflationary environment for the consumers. And this is something that we even talked about last week with Yohei Elam and from Forex Crunch, and we talked about how even last week inflation data out of Europe did not consider the oil plunge. So that's very key there. Natural gas lower this morning by 0.0318 at 2.0296. Gold this morning lower by $3.10 at $1,222.60, all USD. Silver lower by 0.012 at $17.10. Platinum lower by $8.40 at $1,233.80. And cocoa higher by $12 at $28.65. Would like to review what's interesting to us, and this is something that Milton and I talk about frequently, is these treasuries, folks. Take a look at these treasuries. You have the 30-year in the U.S. at 2.773. We're looking almost 0.25% below 3%, and that's in the last week or two. So you have the 5-year at 1.551. That's coming down a bit from where it was about a week ago. You have the 10-year at 2.122, and again 30-year at 2.774. And what we've been watching is this notion of the yield curve, right? So we've been talking about this, the convexity of the yield curve. A year ago, the 30-year was 4%. How many people got it wrong that yields were going to go up? It's amazing. And so you have a flatter yield curve than it was a year ago. Looks like it's a little bit flatter yield curve towards the longer maturity than it was about a month ago. You had, and so the belly of the curve, the 2 and the 5-year, you're really seeing a little bit of a bubble up in that 2 and 5-year yields, and a decrease in yields in the 10 and 30 yields. So I think that's absolutely critical to monitor. Let's see, and also from a dollar perspective, we'll pull up. Let's see, the DXY this morning. DXY this morning currently at 88.218, and we have, so that's a little, so again lower this morning, and that's an interesting thing. So again, as Scott mentioned, as we've been mentioning for the last several weeks, the fact that the strength in the U.S. dollar compared to other currencies, because oil is denominated in U.S. dollars, is a negative in general for oil, for the price of oil. And of course, you have to consider everything else for the price of oil. So let's dive into specific stocks that are making news this morning. GHDX this morning. Let's see. Oncotalk presents through in personalizing treatment of pre-invasive breast cancer. We're having, the stock is currently at $32.48. It's down about 0.5%, so we'll keep an eye on that. LOW lows, price target raised to 75 from 70 at RW Baird, currently at $65.72. Microsoft price target raised to $57 from $53 at FBR Capital, currently at $47.33, higher by about 1/3%. Rackspace downgraded to underperform from neutral at DA Davidson, and they're just waiting for that data to come in. Currently $44.82, lower by 3%. So again, very interesting that downgrade. Again, downgraded to underperform from neutral at DA Davidson on Rackspace. Currently lower at $44.72. Lululemon. Lulu this morning, Q3 results a mixed bag, says Canaccord. Waiting for Lululemon here, just to forgive us, folks, a little bit of slow on the uptake on that chart. DAL Delta Airlines price target raised to $60 from $48 at Deutsche Bank. We've also put a few other airlines there. AAL is American Airlines, JBLU, JetBlue, LUV is LUV is Southwest. Remember, folks, as the price of oil comes in, meaning coming down, airlines are going to, they'll have less of an expense, guys. Basic economics, basic finance here. Your expenses go down, clearly impact on revenue and perhaps even sales, as they could reduce the prices, and that's what Milton was not even intimating, explicitly, really discussing the fact that, hey, oil is coming down. What's that impact on airlines? Delta Airlines this morning at $49.11, higher by 1.61%. AAL, again, a little bit of American Airlines at $51.16, higher by also 1.3%. JBLU is higher by about 1/3% at $15.34, and Southwest higher by about 1/3% at $42.10. Also, Staples upgraded to buy from underperform at Bank of America Merrill. Staples currently at $16.14, higher by about 1/4. This is on the heels of the Staples Office Depot conversations from Starboard, where they're pushing for a merger between the two, Staples and ODP. But again, this is it's an activist investor, Starboard. So again, they'll have conversation. So again, we'll see what effect that has on these particular securities. CONE, CyrusOne upgraded to buy from neutral at Citigroup, currently at $26.33, higher by 0.6%. SONS, Sonos initiated with a buy at B. Riley, target of $5.25, lower this morning by about 1%, currently at $3.74. Teva upgraded to buy from neutral at Stern Aggie, currently at $56.79, just about flat, down about 0.09%, down about a nickel. this morning. Also, CRM Salesforce resumed with an overweight at Piper Jeffrey. CRM price target lowered to 64 from 74, currently at $55.49. Really flat on the day, up about a penny. A quick check before we go on. We have the S&P futures lower by 3.25 now, so a bit of a comeback on the S&P. We'll take a look at that. And it looks like not the high of the morning, but we had a really early morning high at just about 2025. So we'll see again a little bit of a pop back, very early morning in the S&P futures. So let's continue with some of these particular securities. And then we'll monitor the other major indices this morning as well. GoPro, it was upgraded at J.P. Morgan to overweight, $70 price target. Pacific Crest reiterated outperform, $70 price tag. Price target. GoPro currently at $61.82, up about just under 3%. Again, at $61.79. Talisman, we talked about this a few days ago. This is they're higher in pre-market. This is after the report of Repsol mulling a $6 per share bid. Stock is currently at $5.06, up 37% in early trading. So quite a bit more than it was in pre-market. UTX. United Technology lower this morning by about 0.75%. United Technology issues light Q4 fiscal year 15 earnings per share and revenue guidance. It was lower this morning by 2.7% in pre-market, so a bit of a comeback. It was low as $109.13, currently at $113.38. Again, we just see a pop back in the market, now down 4. In the ES futures, S&P, the SPX is lower by 8.65 at 2026.68. So again, I'm sure having an effect by that. FRO, Frontline, bond bounce for Frontline, currently at $2.09, higher by 28% this morning. This is on FRO. Let's spend a little bit of time on syndicates. ARMK at currently at $28.16, lower by 1.4%. Again, these syndicates, these secondaries, they do have obviously it's a dilutive effect. You're putting more shares out there, tends to have a lower an effect of a lower price, at least for the short term on the security. So ARMK. Currently at $28.17, lower by 1.4%. AKR, Acadia Realty, down 2.3% at $31.60. Formcell, 3.4 million common shares of beneficial interest. ATEC, Alphatech, lower by 1.5% at $1.27. Not really getting any movement. Not really getting any movement yet this morning. FLXN is higher by 4%. Quite a bit of an improvement from early morning. They have selling 6 million shares for holders. Was as low this morning by $16.90, currently at $18 and a penny, higher by about 4%. IMUC, Immunocellular, again, not much movement there yet. Lower by 7%, sells $20 million worth of shares and warrants. I remember secondaries can come in various forms, and we've seen that over and over again on a daily basis. So we have a few IPOs this morning: Avol, CNXR, HTP, JRVR, MPG, and WK. And once they open, actually MPG is open currently, and that's currently at $15.16. MPG was going to open. It was priced at $15. So again, we'll see how that progresses there. So as these securities are beginning to trade, we will certainly let you know and provide the necessary information. So lots of insider purchases. We'll just spend a little bit of time on the larger ones and those that are moving within the. We have SAEX insider purchase, but again, stock is really not moving this morning, lower by 3.3%. FOXF, excuse me, Fox Factory. Director purchases 82,000 shares at $14.49, and that's FOXF, and currently at $14.92, higher by 1.84%. We really try to pick out the really larger transactions that we think are really pertinent, and some of these may not have an impact immediately, but may towards the longer term. PSEC Prospect Capital currently at $8.19, down about 0.12%. We also have, let's see, we'll take a look at Chesapeake. CHK, we've mentioned yesterday that it's important to see insiders purchasing on these energy names that have been absolutely beaten to a pulp on some of these. For example, Chesapeake. If you take a look at the daily, I mean, it's amazing where it was back in July at $29.92. Currently at $16.85. Currently, it's important to see these insider purchases, a little bit more of a skin in the game from these directors, executive vice presidents, presidents, CEOs. Really important that we see that happen in these particular securities. SKYW, SkyWest higher by about 2.3%. At $12.23 currently, 10,000 share purchase by the president of a subsidiary. We'll take out a few. Have another energy name, NS, New Star Energy, about flat this morning at $53.66. We have director purchasing 21,000. It's over $1 million transaction there. So again, very important to watch that. FCX, Freeport McMoran, we have 500,000 share purchase at $23.60. That's an almost a $12 million purchase there of the security. So again, important that we see this type of activity in these names. I'll pull up the chart briefly on FCX. Bear with us one moment here. And absolutely crucial that we see this. A stock beaten down like that. You want to see these the directors and various other insiders really come in and offer some support in these securities. Whether or not they're right it's a wait and see kind of game, but important to see that. Let's take a look at VRX. That's a rather impressive purchase as well. Let's see. Jeffrey Ubben purchases 250,000 shares at $140 at $35 million purchase. Currently, the stock is at $139.40. That's a Valiant Pharmaceuticals. That's a significant purchase there, folks. Also, CCI, Crown Castle International Corp. Martin Lenz, director, purchasing $3.9 million worth of the stock. Currently, stock is lower by 0.3% at $76.60. So again, very interesting to see that. SLRC. And this is Solar Capital. Just a little bit of delay on that. Sorry, folks. We'll switch back to the presentation there. Clearly, we're having a little bit of a technical issue on that. So, and that's a CLRC, SLRC currently at $17.96, higher by 1%. This morning. So, folks, before we wish you a great rest of the day and a great weekend, markets, S&P futures lower by 4, SPX lower by 9.01 at 2026.5. Crude oil still lower this morning by $1.33 at $58.62. And we have gold this morning lower by $3.50. Folks, we want to see, as Milton said, we want to see this possible capitulation in oil. We want to see the volume. We want to see follow through, and then perhaps we can see a level forming, a support forming for crude oil specifically. So, folks, we want to thank you for joining us this morning on Unusual Activity, powered by FinancialJuice.com, with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides, along with an impromptu appearance by Scott Nairns. Wishing you a great rest of the day and good hunting, and have a